my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit and every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means time for our Thursday Trends episode. And I am flying solo once again because I've just been enjoying the fuck out of getting to dive into these stories on my own. I won't make it a habit. I know we enjoy having guests and not just hearing my own opinion the entire time, but give me a break this week. Double up, actually. On Tuesday we did a solo episode as well. I'm just loving this. You know, in all honesty, let me just hijack my own show. I don't know why I almost like mildly apologize for talking on my own show and giving my own commentary when that's literally why I have my own show. That's a little bit of that imposter syndrome seeping through that I feel like I have to apologize to the audience for doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing on a podcast that's hosted by just myself. Anyway, I feel amazing today. I want to throw that out there. Anybody that has been going through just like a fog, that's the only way I could describe what I have felt. I want to say the last few weeks, but I feel like a lot of this year thus far, I have just felt like I was like free falling and fucking doing my best to just grab onto something as I was falling down. I didn't feel like I have had much control over, I don't know, the way that I've felt in general. And I hope that that's making sense in some sort of way. Like, I genuinely have just kind of felt like I've been holding on for dear life for particularly the last couple of weeks, but I really do think it's been since the beginning of the year. And I have to say, I woke up today and I just feel a sense of peace. I feel energized. I probably was going through like maybe a bit of a depression, just sort of working through that. Now, the beauty of all the work that I've been doing in general on myself over, a decade plus is that these sort of depressive moments don't sort of encompass my entire existence on a daily basis, right? The waves are easier to manage, I think. And hopefully I get better and better at that. But it is to the point where I almost am unsure if I'm like going through a bit of a depression spell or whatever the term would be for it, or if I'm just tired or whatever it might be. It's like I'm able to function, through it. It's still something I'm struggling with, but it's a lot more manageable than it had been in the past, where I like just wanted to not get out of bed, basically, right? Or I couldn't interact with people, as well as I'd like to. And yeah, today I think a lot of it too is like these last couple weeks, some of it like from being sick and just like being forced to rest. And I'm sorry, I know if you came here for Thursday Trends, just bear with me for a second. I just feel like the ancestors are speaking to me right now to just be honest and be open, because maybe it's going to help somebody who's struggles the way that I do, right? But, what I've given myself the grace to do in these last couple weeks, and I think that's why it's all culminated today, just me waking up and feeling great. I've given myself the grace to not have to be hyper productive, right? Like I've had the same thing on my like priority to-do list for weeks at this point, and it has a nudge. I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not going to beat myself up about it. I know I've been taking care of, the essentials, and I'm doing my best here. So I've given myself a bit of grace, and I've also just been like, you know what, man, like rest. You might just really need some rest, and not like to the point where I'm sleeping all day long and avoiding responsibility, but I'm not pushing myself to sort of work, until bedtime, or to not get enough hours of sleep, or to try to, if I wake up and my alarm goes off at 6, have an honest conversation with myself about like, is this the like, the voice inside of me that is my sabotage voice, telling me to sleep in, or do I genuinely just need sleep? And like, I had the conversation with myself today. I let myself sleep in, an extra 2 hours actually. And I had a real conversation, while half asleep, where I was like, you're feeling incredibly depleted by the time the end of the day comes along, or even by the middle of the day. Yeah, you're genuinely exhausted and you can use some extra sleep. Yeah, it's going to cut into your, ideal schedule for the day, but this is what you need. And I feel like today is the result of that. Like, I'll be listening to myself now where it's like, I feel the best I have, again, maybe all year. For the first time this year, or 3 months into the year, I genuinely feel like myself, like I'm just like in a flow. I feel energized. Like I came into the studio today just genuinely like excited to just sit down and talk about things. And it's not like we're talking about anything, everything's important, but not anything in particular that's like a burning, desire. I just feel really fucking energized today and really good because I think I gave myself the space that I needed to, rest in the literal sense, and just sort of not feel the pressure of having to be hyper productive, as my dog right on cue is just having spasms and getting restless being in the studio. So if you hear some weird noises in the background, full transparency, that's what it is. I feel like I don't know if this cheapens my brand by having dog noises in the back, but we're just going to be authentic here. That I'm going to take my dog with me to the studio because I love him very much. Anyway, now with all that out of the way, I hope that resonates with somebody. If you're going through some shit, you're not feeling like yourself, just kind of like try and listen to yourself a bit and give yourself the space needed to sort it out, to rest, to just decompress a bit. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so Thursday trends. We're going to talk about actress Eiza Gonzalez talking about the overly sexualized. I still can't speak, though. I've rested, but I still can't speak. Overly sexualized Latina in Hollywood. Okay, so this is actually interesting to me just because it talks about a lot of the like Latina tropes, and it's a conversation I want to have about stereotypes and things of that nature. We'll also talk about the election cycle coming up and how the Latin voting demographic is being represented and the numbers that were coming out. Just an interesting article from We Are Me Too about myths and truths about the Latino vote. We'll also talk about I also actually, because I'm going through my notes for the show today, I'm also going to just dispel certain things. I'm going to lay some facts down about what's actually happening right now. A couple things I pulled about like currently what our President Biden has done. Because I feel like it's not spoken about enough. It's very frustrating. So we'll talk about that. Also, we're talking about rice. Leftover rice apparently can cause food poisoning, which is news to me because I don't know about y'all, but I grew up eating a lot of leftover rice. And then on a positive note, we're going to talk about this Frida Kahlo documentary on Prime, which I know I'm like 2 months fucking late on, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. And then for our Ask a Gringo segment, I got a little deep question for y'all about the sacrifices that we make for love and if we think they are justified or not. So we'll talk all about that. Big show today. Big stuff we're going to get into. With that said, let's dive into the BS, the nonsense, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so let's start with this article on actress Eiza Gonzalez. She was in the movie Baby Driver, and I believe she's also a big telenovela actress as well from back in the day. But she's of Mexican descent, and she talks about dealing with the, quote, Latina stereotype and the, quote, overly sexualized idea of a Latin woman in Hollywood. And she says that this has been the biggest challenge in her career. She says, quote, overly sexualized. I can't even speak this word. Does anybody else have trouble with certain words like sexualized? And by the way, in previous iterations of the podcast, like previous seasons, I would have edited out me fucking up a very basic word like sexualized. But you know what? Radical authenticity is the name of my game this year. I'm giving it to you real, raw, and honest. This is who I am. Real people fuck up words and can't read good sometimes. So that's where we are. Back to the article. She said that she's had this big challenge in her career from Hollywood. She said it's due to, quote, the overly sexualized idea of a Latin woman by Hollywood executives. She said something that is so disappointing and so pathetic. She goes on to say that none of my white friends who were in the industry were getting that. It was just me. And this is like an age-old sort of thing, right? The feisty Latina, the sultry Latina, right? I'm trying to think of what the other ones are without repeating anything that's like just disgusting and gross. But we'll leave it there to save myself. But I think it's interesting as persons of color. I always make this sort of distinction or make this point because I think a lot of people don't even recognize what they're sort of doing in the moment, right? And like, even when they're trying to give you a compliment, like an example I always give is like, when people be like, oh, you're so well spoken, right? As if it's a shock, as if it's, you know, a crazy thing that somebody with my background, you know, is well spoken, right? Because these tropes and these stereotypes really are just things that exist for people of color, where we have to almost represent the entire community every single time we go out into the world. White people don't have that same sort of, you know, burden to carry, right? When a white person does something wrong, it's them. It's John Smith, you know, doing something wrong. Where when one of us do something wrong, it is us. You know, it is like, oh, see, that's another one of them, right? And we see this a lot right now with like a lot of the propaganda that's going on with migrants, right? Where, you know, some of them, as with some Americans, are in fact criminals, are people who aren't trying to live a better life and want to, you know, steal and cheat their way to prosperity. And now they become the poster child for migrants everywhere, where again, when white people do something wrong, they are not held up as, see, all white people do this. The closest thing now, I think, as like a form of protection, because I know this is what the other people are going to argue, is the idea of a Karen. And yeah, Karen has been adapted after, you know, generations of sort of us having to collectively be held accountable for everything somebody from our community does, and white people not having to carry that same burden, right? Or, you know, I mean, you see this a lot with the word ghetto and who it's associated with, right? We're quick to label people as ghetto or when they're loud or, you know, dressed a certain way, right? These stereotypes. But again, when it's a loud white woman or a real housewife of whatever the fuck wearing something that was deemed ghetto on a person of color, but now is fashionable because it's a white woman wearing it. You know, again, like, we bear this sort of burden of representing the entire community every time we do something, right? And yeah, I just find it to be really interesting. And I think this is sort of what she's talking about to a degree as well, because she mentions, you know, somebody like Margot Robbie in the article, and she mentions like how Margot Robbie is gorgeous, she's hot, you know, and she's not held to that same degree, though she can get serious roles that aren't just based upon her being like a vixen, right? Even though she is arguably an incredibly attractive woman. But when it comes to Latinas, it's like, oh, they have to play this hot vixen who is like the temptress or, you know, falls into this sort of stereotype as being feisty or fiery. That's the other thing too as well. It's like, okay, a Latin woman stands up for herself or isn't taking people's shit. Now she's a feisty, fiery Latin woman, right? Oh my, there's that Latin fire, right? Meanwhile, a white woman does the same thing. She's a fucking feminist, right? We salute it. So it's a double standard, and it's just always interesting to me. And I think so many of us have, all of us, myself included, are victims of stereotypes that we believe, or we unknowingly have sort of this bias because certain things have become societal norms, right? The idea of a fiery Latina has become a societal norm. And again, there's, you know, some of it is done in jest, and it's not like, you know, no harm, no foul type of thing. But we've been conditioned to believe these sort of tropes and not recognize that we're not designating tropes for white people. It's really just, you know, communities of color that are getting these sort of tropes, and again, bearing that burden of representing the entire community. So just thought that was an interesting segue into that. It's something that I think about quite often when I see some of the commentary that is done on us or the BIPOC community in general. It's just, I think, an interesting thing that's not spoken about quite enough. Now, we are going to dive into the elections here. This is going to be, strap in, people, all right? We're going to fucking do a bit of a deep dive here, okay? Because WeAreMeToo.com did a very extensive article called The Myths and Truths About the Latino Vote and How Latinas actually could impact the 2024 elections. Latinas are superheroes. That's not even a part of the quote. I just want to throw that out there. Everything is how y'all are about to save us because we can't save ourselves as men. And partially we're onto something here. Okay, so according to the California Civic Engagement Project, Latinos have accounted for nearly a quarter of all voter growth in the U.S. over the last 2 decades, represents almost 8 million of the 32.5 million new voters. However, key driver of this increase has been the growth in Latina voters. They say Latinas have consistently higher turnout rates than Latino men. Y'all are just better than us in so many damn ways. Like that, voting matters, people. I just want to, for all my Latinos who aren't voting, stop bitching about things if you don't actually show up and do your part. I know it doesn't feel like much, but you have to do your part. You can't stand on anything. You can't complain. You have no right to. We have a right to complain, but you aren't justified in your complaints if you aren't actively participating in the system that is designated for you to have a voice, that people fought and died for. Anyway, they say this year an estimated 36.2 million Latinos are eligible to vote, up from 32.3 in 2020. So we've gone up about 4 million eligible voters in the Latin community. So yes, if we all collectively decided to come together for one candidate, we could decide who's in the White House. That's actually very empowering when I think about it. It's obviously not going to happen. We all have different of opinions and things like that, as we should. Everybody has a right to do so, but it does showcase the power we potentially could have. This is what I'm always trying to fucking drive home. If we were just collectively a little bit more in line and a little bit more proactive, we can really make a difference in this world, in this country specifically, right? Now, they talk about how Latinos are considerably less likely than other demographics to be eligible to vote. Obviously, there's, immigration and status and things like that. They say, according to the Pew Research Center, this is partly because the nation's Latino population includes a, quote, large number of people who are too young to vote or who are not U.S. citizens. Latinos who are not eligible to vote include permanent residents, green card holders, and those in the process of becoming permanent residents, those in the U.S. on temporary visas, and unauthorized immigrants. They say one of the constant narratives around the Latino vote is precisely the swinging nature of our political views. Yes, we are kind of all over the place. Latinos are not a monolith, obviously. Now, assuming we all respond the same way to a political campaign is not only wrong, but it's incredibly naive. For example, while Donald Trump made gains among Latinos in 2020, a majority of Latino voters, 59%, which is a very slim margin, by the way. I love how they said majority, that you're being gracious. I would have said a slim majority of voters, 59% of Latino voters. It's still close. 59% voted for Joe Biden, obviously leaving 41% to Donald Trump. Again, pretty close. However, they're saying that a recent New York Times /Siena College poll found that President Biden is losing support among Latinos. And I want to dive into this a bit, but I'll read a little bit more of what the article is, because I do have some numbers that I want to fact check over here a bit when it comes to the voters' sort of preference. We'll get into that. So, New York Times reported an increasing number of Latino voters who are saying they are, quote, more likely to vote for former President Donald Trump. The poll shows Trump edging out Biden amongst Latino voters, with 46% supporting the former president and 40% favoring Biden. While many predicted Trump would lose all the support of Latino voters during his first term, during the 2020 election, we were all surprised when the support from, quote, immigrant-heavy precincts improved dramatically. Yet Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric backfired on his hopes, and roughly 60% of Latinos voted for Biden. Similarly, Latino voters helped flip Arizona to Democrats. However, today, Latino support for Trump has nothing to do with immigration and everything to do with Trump's stance on the economy. So this is interesting to me. They're talking about what are the issues that drive the Latino vote. And it's different than what I personally expected. Now, they say, yes, historically, roughly a third of Latino voters have supported Republicans in presidential elections, 1/3. However, considering the current situation of the economy and how it impacts communities of color, Latinos decide to vote according to what affects their reality first. According to Unidos US, the main issue for Latinos in 2024 is precisely this. The organization asked respondents to list their top 3 issues in November 2023. 54% named inflation and the rising cost of living as a top issue, an 8-point jump compared to 2022. Similarly, 44% named jobs and the economy a top issue, marking a 15-point leap. Furthermore, 30% said the Democratic Party would best address their top concern, as well as 21% opted for the Republican Party. So in that little study they did, 30% said the Democratic Party would best address their top concern. 21% said the Republican Party. Now they're saying, meanwhile, immigration didn't show up as a top concern. However, a February Gallup survey found that the largest portion of U.S. voters, 28%, consider immigration the country's biggest problem, followed by 20% naming the government and 12% the economy. In short, so they're talking about that was a general poll of all Americans, not just Latinos. So they're saying, in short, while most Americans worry about immigration, Latinos are actually concerned about the economy. So this is what's interesting to me, okay? If your concern is the economy, this is what always fucks me up about my Republican family members or people I run into in different circles of life, you know, at the barbershop, and I'm getting into a debate as I'm getting a skin fade with a random customer next to me or something like that, right? They talk about the economy and all these different things, right? Let's talk about the facts with it. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and say that the cost of living isn't ridiculous. I mean, I live in New Jersey and I work in and out of, you know, between New York and New Jersey, you know, 2 states that it's ridiculously expensive to coexist in, you know, and I've worked technically speaking out of California, you know, so another state that tax the hell out of me and has a problem with the cost of living, expensive places, right? So these are all things I'm very much aware of, affected by, but I do think this whole idea of placing it on Biden and acting like things are not getting done or becoming better is an unfair take, and it's a skewed take. And let's just talk about it, right? And by the way, I'm not saying he's done all that he could do. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying people aren't suffering, but it's not all that people are making it out to be, or it's not all falling on him. So I'm prefacing this a lot. Let's just talk about a couple things that I pulled that I felt like kind of refute a bit of the blame that gets put onto Biden about the economy or where the economy is going, or if the economy is really your number one issue. Let's talk about some things, right? So under Biden, the U.S. Justice Department is actually reportedly opening a criminal investigation involving property management software company RealPage and some of its corporate landlord clients amid a lawsuit from the District of Columbia Attorney General alleging 14 district landlords, quote, illegally raised rents for tens of thousands of residents by collectively sharing their data with this company, RealPage. And why do I bring that up? Okay, people talk about the cost of living, rent, and all these different things. You can't afford to live, you know, a fucking happy and content lifestyle because your rent is ridiculous depending on where you live. Most places, honestly. So a lot of that is, obviously, they say, oh, Biden. Well, under him, the U.S. Justice Department is allegedly opening a criminal investigation into these landlords, right? And obviously, we're only talking about tens of thousands. There's you know, millions around the country, but there's something happening. It's being addressed, right, to a degree. Now, I'm not saying that this solves yours and mine's issue at all in the larger context, but they're going after people who are doing things. And my point is also, not all this falls on the president or the government itself, right? You have people taking advantage and price gouging, right? Landlords are taking advantage of a ridiculous housing crisis. The fact that inflation has happened, right? And that the cost of everything is more expensive. They're purposely doing this not because they have to, but because we've all gotten used to paying more money for everything, right? Like, and this leads perfectly into another thing, right? The White House has announced it is forming a, quote, striker force to target companies it deems not meeting their obligations regarding lowering prices for consumers. Part of the formulation will involve the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. The White House says it wants to pursue businesses that engage in anti-competitive and unfair practices to lower prices in food, prescription drugs, and transportation. This is another thing. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's an election year, that's why he's forming something like this. Great. Possibly. But that's as old as time. This is what politicians do. They don't do anything until they have to. And regardless if he's doing it because it's an election year, it's still showing a step in the right direction. And again, it's showing you the real enemy. Everybody is putting the blame on the person in office, and I see this a lot from Republican friends and family members. Look, everything is so expensive to get gas, to eat. Biden. Bro, these are companies. If you dug a little bit deeper, when we had, remember, gas was like going crazy, gas prices, those companies were reporting record quarters for their profits for those quarters were record numbers. If their prices were being raised because the cost was so high for them, they wouldn't be able to record record numbers. They're recording record numbers because they're price gouging us. We're being told one thing, inflation and supply chain and Biden and this and that. Meanwhile, they're laughing all the way to the bank because we have this veil of it's kind of like, we're getting pointed in the wrong direction of who to blame at the end of the day, right? And they're laughing all the way to the bank because while we squabble about this on the internet and your crazy Theo is, blaming Biden as he takes a picture of how expensive gas is at the pump, these executives and CEOs and stockholders for these gas companies are laughing their way into another Maserati because they just fucking had a record quarter. They're price gouging us. There was the same shit with eggs where there was like this disease that allegedly was going on with chickens, and they were like, we have to raise the price of eggs, blah, blah, blah. And then like factual studies showed actually the disease wasn't so widespread that it really had that much of an effect that the price should have gone up that much. These companies are price gouging us. The airlines are price gouging us, right? They have maybe at one point in time felt like they had to raise their prices, right, because of losses from the pandemic and things of that nature. But now they're not dropping the price because we've gotten used to paying higher prices. It doesn't have to do with inflation anymore. It's them price gouging the shit out of us because we got used to paying that much. We've normalized paying this much, right? And now their corporate greed, their CEOs, inflated salaries, their stock prices driving through the roof. They want to keep getting as much as they can out of us without giving us anything extra, right? It's them gouging at the end of the day. And of course, things like inflation didn't help, right? That created this sort of, process that we're in right now of the cost of goods going up. But again, if these companies really wanted to, they can go back to normal prices now, but they're choosing not to because they're enjoying these extra profits. That's not Biden's fault, right? That's the company's price gouging. Now, him forming this task force or whatever you want to call it to go after them. Hopefully it's a real thing. Hopefully they really follow through and actually go after some people. But at the very least, it's a symbol that they're paying attention to what is actually affecting Americans, right? How we are being affected by this. Who is actually to blame for it? Not some fucking polarizing political thing of we're just going to blame the party in office because it makes it easier for us to win elections. Like, that's some bullshit propaganda stuff that we're all being fed. And the economy as well, right? If the economy is really your bread and butter of what you're worried about, the economy added more than 14 million jobs. The number is now nearly 14.9 million higher than it was before the pandemic. So we are actually in a place where we have more jobs than we did pre-pandemic. 4.9 million jobs more than we had before the fucking pandemic. I don't know about y'all, but I think that's probably a good thing that there are more jobs out there before one of the most catastrophic events in human history happened. I think it's a sign that we're moving in the right direction. Now, you want to talk about fair pay and all those things? Absolutely. There's an issue with that. There's a discrepancy in how much we are getting paid versus how much it costs to just take a breath of fresh air these days. 110%. But again, if the economy is your bread and butter, you're believing propaganda at the end of the day, and you're ignoring real factual numbers. Again, another one, the unemployment rate dropped back to just above the pre-pandemic low. So we are sitting at just above the pre-pandemic low in unemployment. Again, after one of the most catastrophic events in human history, right? Unfilled job openings, again, outnumber unemployed job seekers. So there are more open jobs than there are unemployed people. That sounds, again, pretty good for the economy. And lastly, defying expectations, the nation's economy expanded 2.5% in 2023, marking the third straight year of economic growth. Again, the economy is your bread and butter. This is the third straight year that our economy has grown. Now, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, numbers, statistics, they can all be skewed to favor a certain side. But the facts are the facts. More jobs, unemployment rate is almost back to what it was when it was a pre-pandemic low, and our economy has expanded for the third straight year. Again, who's been president over the last 3 years? Joe Biden. Is he my number one choice? Absolutely not. But also, a lot of the stuff that is being held against him is just absolute bullshit. And lastly, actually, this is honorable mention over here, because the housing crisis obviously is a big problem. It's hard to find a house you can afford. It's hard to find a fucking house in general these days for most people who are looking. Highly competitive if you've been out there. And a lot of what's happening is hedge funds are now entering the single family market. And these are people that can afford to pay $400, $500, $600, $1 million in cash to buy a home, right? Those guys are fucking up the market because they're willing to overpay, because they'll turn it into a short-term rental, or it's an investment that they can then sit on for a few years that they know is going to grow eventually, and they're going to make their money back, right? Because they're not concerned with living in it, and they could rent it in the short term and make that money back, right? So part of what's happening, not all of it, but part of what's happening with the housing shortage is a lot of investors with liquid funds are driving up the prices because they can pay cash and they can overpay, right? And it's worth it for them. So what's being done about this? Well, Democrats have introduced a bill called the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act. And this would mandate that hedge funds, first of all, they need a better name. That's a mouthful. But anyway, this would mandate that hedge funds defined as corporations, partnerships, or REITs that manage pooled funds for investors demands that they sell off all single-family homes over a 10-year period and eventually prevent them from holding those properties completely. Okay. I've just given you a couple bullet points here about the economy and addressing things that are apparently the number one issue within our community. Again, there's no guarantees. It's an election year. Some of these things are performative to a degree. But the Democrats and Joe Biden have shown proof that they are addressing the issues that we claim are the most important to us. Again, it's not perfect. I'm not parading around, but the economy is in a better place. And much of the issues that we have are due to corporate greed at the end of the day. The rich people who are buying up these single-family homes, the greedy landlords who are excessively raising their rents, the companies who are price gouging us on everyday goods that we need because we've normalized high prices, and they refuse to cut into their own already exorbitant salaries. Those are the real villains in this story. So just some food for thought. Next time your conservative Theo wants to pull some shit on you, play this card over here. Maybe mentally make note of some of these statistics I've given you, because a lot of it is just propaganda. If you look at conservative news media, read it, watch clips on TikTok, all these different things, you would think that the country is on fire right now and that there are a shortage of literally everything, right? And that Joe Biden is just sitting there, like Mr. Burns in The Simpsons, his hands together, just enjoying the country burning to the ground, right? But it's just not a reality. There's a lot of good that is happening, a lot of progress that is happening coming off of, again, one of the most catastrophic events in human history. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, greed is at the root of so much of our issues. But because these politicians have made it so fucking polarizing, they're gonna use blame on the other side and not actually address the real issue at hand and hold the real villains of the story accountable. And that's part of the problem right now. That's why I wanted to just discuss this and bring up some of these points to really break through some of the noise and point the finger at who's really responsible for the things affecting the everyday person. And don't get me started on fucking student loans and like how ridiculous and predatory they were and all of the above. Like these are the real villains in the story. I hate to break it to anybody who just wants to blame it on the president and this, that, and the third. And again, the president's trying to do something. So that's where I'm going to leave this story here. And one story I wanted to quickly get to here was one that I think is going to hit close to home for many of us. And it's the idea that leftover rice can cause food poisoning without this very important step. All right. I don't know about y'all, but I grew up eating a lot of leftover rice, and I still do to this day. My mom be giving me, when I go over there, I always make sure I take myself a little to-go Tupperware of whatever she cooked, because as much as I complained as a kid that all we ate was rice and beans, I genuinely miss having rice and beans as the main part of my diet these days. Now, they're saying the main issue with leftover rice isn't about reheating it. It's actually about how you store the rice after cooking it. So according to a 2021 study published on the National Library of Medicine, rice is often contaminated with spores of the bacteria Bacillus cereus. I think I pronounced that properly. You may also find B. cerealis in other grain-based foods like pasta and quinoa. However, rice may be more likely to contain the spores, which are mainly found in soil because it's not as processed as other food. According to the Food and Wine, I think it's a magazine or a website, they say uncooked rice contains B. cereus, and the bacteria spores can survive even after rice is cooked. After that, the bacteria's optimal growing temperature is between 39 degrees Fahrenheit and 118 degrees Fahrenheit. This is known as the danger zone, okay? Because your rice stays at those temperatures. If your rice stays at those temperatures for too long, it can technically poison you. Poison you. Scary stuff. I wonder what this means, poison you. I feel like you're not going to die, but you might spend an evening on the toilet, unfortunately. Now, experts say that if you don't refrigerate your rice quickly after cooking it, B. cereus spores can develop into bacteria. So avoid leaving cooked rice in a rice cooker or out on your kitchen counter for an hour or more. They ask who is guilty of this. My hand is raised to the sky. I am horrendous at normal human being things, but when I cook, I do not put it away right away. Like, I usually cook a little bit extra so I can save myself, from having to just be out here sweating 3 meals a day. So I'll have my leftovers, and I'm guilty of not putting that shit away right away. An hour, yeah, I'll cook a meal. I will go and eat. I'll throw on a movie or something, and I'll come back to it, after the movie's done 2 hours later. And then maybe start bagging stuff up to put it into the fridge. So I probably poisoned myself 1 or 2 times at this point, unknowingly. So just a little, FYI. We're giving you some information here for every part of your life on today's podcast. Your political vote. I'm going to tell you how to store your leftovers. We're really just kind of hitting everything on today's show. This is a lifestyle episode, if you will. So just some words of wisdom and a precautionary tale for those of us who enjoy a little bit of rice and leftover rice. I've had like I was craving because they're mentioning how somebody was saying their parents would use the leftover rice for like breakfast and throw in some eggs. I know my Filipino friends would do the same thing, and I've been having a craving for that recently. I can't cook rice for shit. I gotta ask my mom to make some rice, and I can do this breakfast thing. I'm having a weird craving right now. Anyway, that's it for our nonsense, our BS, our deep dive. Now, with that said, we're gonna quickly touch on a documentary that I've been apparently fucking sleeping on, but it's one of our incredible figures of the Latin community, incredible artist that we are going to celebrate, touch on that sounds weird, touch on her story in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente! All right, so I guess I've been living under a fucking rock because apparently in January, a documentary came out about Frida Kahlo, who's just an incredible Mexican artist. And maybe I don't know, maybe I've been sleeping on it, or maybe the reviews haven't, or people haven't been talking about it for whatever reason so recently, but it's available on Prime. And it is a documentary that's supposed to be sort of the most honest depiction of this person, of this incredible artist, this figure from our community, because it's actually based upon her diary. So this is an article I pulled from NPR where they said, quote, "Instead of having the historical distance of other people explaining to us what she meant with her art," Gutierrez, who created the documentary, says, "I really wanted to give that gift to viewers of just hearing it from her own words. We wanted to have the most intimate entryway into her heart and in her mind." So it's called Frida, Frida Kahlo's, in Frida, I think it's just called Frida. I think In Her Own Words is like the subtitle for it, right? But they say that the words are actually taken from letters and diaries and voiced by Mexican actor Fernanda Echevarria del Rivero. I'm butchering names out here today. The film is actually in Spanish with English subtitles, which I absolutely love. I love that authentic touch right there. Now, they're saying that in the documentary, again, words were taken from handwritten letters and illustrated diaries, and all of this done with the attempt of getting inside of her head. What was she thinking? What was she feeling? I felt that as a Latina, somebody that grew up in Latin America, there was this connection I have with the world created by Frida. And this is, again, by the person responsible. Her last name is Gutierrez. They just keep referencing her by her last name. I'm gonna look this up real quick. I want to make sure I'm giving people the proper credit over here. So Carla Gutierrez, amazing, a Latina made this movie, is responsible for this documentary, which is on my list of things I'm gonna watch this week. I think I have some time over the weekend. I could dive into this on Prime. And I'm ashamed that it took me almost 3 months to recognize that this was even available. But she's an amazing artist. If you don't know her by name, just Google it. You've definitely seen her face. I think there's like products from her in Target, like, using her likeness or whatever. Like, you've definitely seen her around before. But she's a really legendary Mexican artist. Salma Hayek did a biopic of hers. I don't know. I think it was in the 90s or 2000s, where she played Frida Kahlo. But this is, I love this kind of stuff where it's like, it's also horrifying when I'm thinking about like, if when I'm gone, people discover my journals and then like read them verbatim, I'll probably be like cringing in my grave. But I think it's beautiful. Like, if you're a fan, I guess, and like you got to know the real version of the person that you are idolizing, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get to that point of anybody really idolizing me that way, but I'm gonna put this on record. If you're thinking about if I'm gone years later, if you're thinking about using my journals verbatim to tell my story, please don't. I would just like to put that out there. I am not co-signing that. I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah, I need to be able to explain some of the thoughts that are written down in there. I can't just let you raw dog my thoughts like that and leave it open to interpretation. That's me. But I will watch this documentary. So yeah, go watch it. It's on Prime. Again, it's called Frida in Her Own Words. So good stuff there. And now I'm excited. I want to talk about an interesting topic in Ask A Gringo. And we got y'all's take. I got some takes on this. Talk about love or relationships as per usual. These are the hot button topics that I like. So we'll talk about that. in our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question.
All right, so for today's Ask a Gringo segment, I'm pulling from an article that I got where Shakira was talking about the sacrifices that she made for love. And to quote, now, first of all, we all know she went through a very public divorce. She caught her husband cheating. Was it peanut butter? Was it? I think the way she caught her husband, tell me if I'm wrong on this, was that the peanut butter jar was suspiciously low, and that's how she knew that her husband was cheating on her. Anyway, I believe he's a big footballer or soccer player for us here in the States. Anyway, now she says, quote, "For a long time, I put my career on hold to be next to Gerard so he could play football," the Colombian singer told The Times. "There was a lot of sacrifice for my love. My priority was my home, my family. I believed in till death do us part. I believed that dream, and I had that dream for myself and my children," she told Billboard in September 2023. "My parents have been together, 50 years. They love each other like the first day with a unique and unrepeatable love, and it's always been my example." That's beautiful. That's sweet. I love that. I'm a lover of love. I like the traditional sense, of love. My parents have been together, I don't know for how long, but they're still together. And that's the goal that I definitely have is to, have somebody raise a family and grow old together, if you will. But it is, I would say, difficult to balance it all. Particularly, I think it's difficult for anybody. I can selfishly speak to my perspective as like the non-traditional route, which I think obviously adds a bit more stress just due to it being a bit erratic schedule-wise and the journey of it all, right? It being very up and down. But I think for anybody, it could be in the context of any career that you have that is demanding in any sort of way, where you maybe want to work your way up the ladder. There's a lot that you have to sacrifice in order to do so. And as I always say, a yes to one thing is a no to something else. So if you're going to be incredibly career-driven and greatness-oriented, something else is going to have to suffer. And generally, it's going to be your personal life and the people that you love as a result, right? And like athletes are great examples of this. Like you look at, I'm obsessed with the idea of Michael Jordan for so many reasons. I mean, obviously his talent, but his willingness to sacrifice absolutely everything for greatness is fascinating to me. I respect it. I don't know if I want to replicate it because I look at Michael Jordan and his personal life from the outside looking in. Obviously, I don't know this man, but his personal life is not anything to be envious of. Aside from, obviously being ridiculously wealthy, it all came at a cost. He's divorced. He seemingly still holds on to a lot of resentment from his playing career, from people in his life. And it seems like without basketball, he doesn't feel like a whole person. There's like that void that he still has in his heart. But that's what he sacrificed for greatness. That he basically said, this is going to be more important than anything else in my entire life. I'm going to obsess over it more than anything else. It's even my highest priority. I have time for basically nothing else except for this. And that feels like a sad life to me, regardless of all the accolades, regardless of all the money and fame and all that stuff and rings. Personally, I don't think the juice was worth the squeeze there. For me, as a person, I want to achieve great things in this life. I want to operate at a high level. I want to be at the top of my game as much as I can be. But also, I think you have to decide what you're willing to give up to get that. For me, I want to have the family life. I want to be close to my parents. I want to be close to my niece and nephew and my sister and my brother-in-law. I love the connection I have to all of them and the accessibility I have to all of them at this point in my life, right? And how I've prioritized that a bit more, even just where I live, the proximity of where I live, right? And sort of being if, like for me, for example, a lot of opportunity exists in Los Angeles, but I personally, or Miami, but I personally can't see myself moving that far away from my family because that regular family time is incredibly important to me, right? So that's like my line, where it's like if an opportunity came up in LA or Miami, I really don't see how I could say yes to it because it would take me away from the relationships that I hold so dear that I've sort of built over these last few years. And watch, as the universe works, I'm going to get like a fucking life-changing offer to move out to LA or something. Watch. And I'm going to have to like be faced with that decision. And y'all are going to be calling me a hypocrite when you see me out there on the beaches in LA. But that's like, but these are things you have to kind of go through in your head, and relationships are a part of that. And like, so Shakira, to make her relationship work or work in a traditional sense, I guess she relocated to where he was going to play football or soccer. And yeah, Shakira wasn't very active up until I think after the divorce in music, like she wasn't putting out new records from my understanding, or at least wasn't in the public eye like that as much. And it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation, right? So we'll just dive into what I asked the people, right? I basically just asked y'all at DJ Dramos on Instagram, maybe part of the conversations, but putting your dreams, your career on hold for your partner or relationship, like what are your thoughts on that, right? Because again, especially in their scenario, right? So like, this is the thing as well. We can't have it all. There's literal time constraints, energy constraints, whatever. Like if Shakira was going hard at her music career as like a touring artist, recording artist, traveling all over the world, he's going hard at his career as a professional athlete, also traveling or having practices all the time, endorsement deals, all the stuff that comes along with being a high level athlete. Who the fuck is going to be at home raising the kids, basically, right? Or how are the kids going to have a semblance of normal life in a school system, right? Are they going to travel with her? Are they going to, like what the nanny's going to raise them? She's always going to be gone. Who's going to be at the house, right? Or how are the two of them going to connect if she's constantly traveling, he's constantly doing his work for sports? Like it's like in that type of relationship, in order for the family dynamic to not suffer, one of them has to take a back seat in their career, right? And we saw that with somebody like Giselle and Tom Brady, right? She definitely took a bit of a backseat in her career so that he can thrive and, and not have to carry the burden of the family life, essentially, right? He could focus on his career. And obviously it didn't end well for them. But I think, unfortunately, again, operating at those highest of high levels, somebody's going to have to take a backseat in some sort of way. You can't both be doing it, right? And that's when, even in this scenario, he was basically the one doing it, and it still didn't work out. So, just things we gotta be aware of. Again, a yes to one thing is a no to something else. But I'm gonna read this. This kind of went off in my DM, so I want to try to get to as many as I can. At Growing with Sin said, "If they don't match your dreams, they're not for you. Learn that the hard way." And 100% agree with that sentiment. Your partner has to support your dreams. This is a non-negotiable for me. Because this shit is hard enough. Like, the outside world is telling me that I suck on a regular basis. I can't have the person that I lie in bed with at night also essentially tell me I suck. They have to believe my crazy-ass dreams. They have to, even if they don't get it, they have to be egging me on and supporting me and sort of be that soft landing place when I need it, right? It doesn't work without that. Without that dynamic, I can't see how a relationship will work, particularly if you are a person chasing a dream that is a little bit outside of the norm, or if you're just like, I want to be fucking, the CEO of my company. Like, that's a very crazy dream. Or I want to be a principal. I want to be this. These are difficult things, and your partner has to be there to encourage you when life inevitably fucking just punches you in the gut and makes you feel like it's impossible to get there, right? So definitely your partner has to support your dreams. But again, it then has to be an honest conversation of how far are you wanting your dream to go, right? Because we get to a point where, again, if you're going to be Shakira operating at the highest level recording constantly, putting out albums, collaborating, touring, being at all the events, it's unrealistic to expect her to be able to provide a normal mom life at the end of the day, right? So then she has to decide at that point, do I want to be an artist who just records and never tours? That way I get to be at home with the kids, right? Or maybe I just do one-off dates so that I don't have to be, right? But then it's like, okay, but then I'm not being as big of an artist as I potentially could be. Again, it's a yes to one thing, is a no to something else. You have to decide where that line is for you. And your partner has to be okay with it as well. Let's see, at Bren J Life Coaching, the homie, she says, I had to check in with the partner on this one. Honestly, he let me go ham in my dreams and still does. I asked him if he resented me going first. He said, quote, honestly, no. It blows my mind because he had to go hard that first year so I could stay home and practice my craft of coaching and community building. I'm hoping he responds on this. But P.S., when I say he went hard, the man worked 60-plus hour weeks and just had Father's Day off, basically. And this is an interesting concept, right? Because, again, this is real-life practicality, right? I don't want to put us in a fantasy world where it's like, you know, oh, they better be supporting you, chasing your dreams or nothing. It's like, bro, if we're really trying to have this family relationship, marriage dynamic, there's going to be give and take. And I say that as the person who generally in relationships was the one taking, because my career was so crazy and I've worked so hard to get here that I can't imagine diluting that for anybody else, right? My initial mindset is sort of had been, you just need to be down to come along for the ride or this can't work, basically. And I've since softened on that and adjusted a bit. And that's why I'm mentioning that, because it resonates with me what she just said, where her husband basically had to go first and he laid the groundwork. He busted his ass so that he could get them in a good place financially, or even just busted his ass so that they could live off of one person being the real breadwinner while the other person began to establish themselves in their career, in their dream. And then once they did, can then meet that person back so that, you know, the husband can sort of retract some of the hours that he was putting in. And again, that is real world practical application of this idea of, like, there's going to be give and take within it. You both can't be going 100 miles an hour and then expect to have the family life as well. And this has been my argument. I'll be fully transparent. I think in my last relationship, a lot of contention was around my career and how much time I was putting into it. And I think a lot of what made it clear that that person wasn't for me, amongst other things, was sort of the inability to really recognize all that I was doing, like what I was doing, right? And not like recognizing my gifts, you know, or because she definitely celebrated, you know, my talents and things like that. But the problem I've run into is people will celebrate it up until the point that it inconveniences them, right? They love, like if I'm on dates or if I've dated and gone through the talking phase, a woman will find my drive and my passion attractive. But then when it becomes inconvenient for them, it's a problem, right? So it's like, okay, I can't make it to your friend Susan's fucking random birthday party. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to work. And eventually that becomes an issue. I'm always the one going to these parties alone. Everybody's with their boyfriend and you're not there. Well, yeah, I'm not out at a fucking strip club with my friends. I'm working, right? This is my career. This is what comes along with it, you know? But again, those are points of contention that often begin to build up. And I think, you know, the point I was trying to drive home about my previous relationship, my mindset was this: I want the traditional life. I want to drop my kids off at school. I want to have family dinners. I want to do all of those things. I want to go on family vacations. I want to be home, on the weekends and share that time. I want to, coach the little league team. I'd be a horrendous coach, but I like the idea of it, right? But in order for us to get there, I need to be 100 miles an hour at what I'm doing right now, right? You need to be okay with picking up some of the slack for right now, and I'll support you as much as I can. I don't expect you to be okay with being a stay-at-home mom if that's not your deal, right? the sacrifice I'm speaking of more than anything, because we didn't live together, so it wasn't like I was like, I need a meal, I need you to cook my meals for me and my laundry and all that shit. It was more so like, I'm sorry, but I can't have fucking date night every single week or be going out every single week with you to do different things, right? Or there are times where we kind of, it was like semi-long distance, like 2-hour drive or whatever, hour and a half. I can't drive up to you every single week because I have a lot on my plate. Doesn't mean that we're not talking every day, texting on the phone, FaceTiming, all those little things. But some of those extra stuff I'm not going to consistently be able to do because I'm building right now. I'm saving money. I'm working as much as possible so that I can invest in different things that in the long run will allow us to then have a more relaxed and free lifestyle. But in these initial stages, I'm building right now. And I have to do that. I have to work the crazy hours. I have to be unavailable at times so that I can then put us in a position where I can take my foot off the gas and we can have a more normal lifestyle. And I'm trying to do it right now before we have a family, before we do all these things, so that when that time comes, I don't have to be going as hard. But there was a sort of disconnect in that, right? And I think it's a lot of like social media culture, friend culture, whatever it is, where people will look at what the other person to the left and right of them is doing and be like, oh, my boyfriend must not care about me because look at Sally's going on vacation all the time with her boyfriend and Cindy's fucking out to dinner all the time and these things. And yeah, that's great for them. But that's not what I've told you from the beginning is going to be our lifestyle. I want something more. Her boyfriend, Fred, is a fucking accountant. Yeah, of course. He gets out of the office at 5 o'clock and has the freedom to do all these other things because he has a normal, traditional lifestyle. No shade at Fred for being an accountant. But if that's what you want, go find another fucking Fred the accountant. You knew what this was when you got into it. I'm like, I don't know how I just get on these modes where I'm like fucking venting like all this pent up aggression for some reason. I don't know what's happening. This is why it's just so therapeutic for me, this podcast, and why I love doing it so much. Thank you all for giving me a safe space. Anyway, but again, this is sort of the sacrifice that you have to make to be in a relationship with me. And again, not saying you put your career on hold and things like that. And in fact, I've dated people who were career oriented as well. And actually, I think that was the healthiest relationship because they were so involved in their own thing. They weren't giving me shit about being involved in my thing. Like, they got it. We were matching each other's energy where it was like, yeah, I would love to see you tonight, but I'm sorry, I can't. I have like this deadline I have to catch up on. And I'm not going to be, all butthurt about it because I get it. I have a lifestyle that's like that as well, where it's going to make things complicated at times. And they were more inclined to be like, hey, I can't do like, a crazy getaway or whatever, but like, you want to just meet, like, you want to go grab lunch real quick, like for my lunch break for an hour? Yeah, let's do that. Like, that's what I mean. Like, those are practical sort of things that in a healthy relationship, you designate to make it work, right? It's not all or nothing at the end of the day. And again, this is the sacrifice you make. Yeah, maybe we're not going to be the couple who is fucking hanging out, every single day, every minute of every single fucking day. That's just not going to be us. And you have to be okay with, your friend fucking Lucy having that and not comparing our relationship or thinking it means something about our relationship, right? And those are the sacrifices that have to be made to make it work. And I think I feel like I deviated from the original thing of like the sacrifice for love, but I think in general, anybody who's been in a long-term relationship knows you're making sacrifices constantly for the other person. Now, what I will say is, you never want to make the type of sacrifice that is going to lead you to resenting the other person or you feeling like your life has been left unfulfilled. Life is too short for that. I think that was one of the responses I did get. Shout out to V.S. Ayori was said, don't. Life is too short to not live the life you want. And I agree with that. And I think you have to find the happy medium. And again, it's where your priorities lie. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's like, what does success mean to you? It's a very personal thing. For Michael Jordan, success to him was literally just being the greatest basketball player planet Earth has ever seen. So he made his choices in accordance with that. For me, success means nothing if I don't have somebody to share it with and I don't have a family to spend time and share that with as well, right? So with that knowledge in mind, I'm prepared to maybe sacrifice potential greatness or monetary success if it means I get to have more time with the people I love and care about, and to be the type of father, husband, and boyfriend that I want to be. Son, brother, uncle, right? That stuff is equally as important to me. So I'm going to make decisions where I might be leaving money on the table, opportunity, fame, leaving parts of that on the table for the sake of wanting to also have this more traditional family life, right? It's like, I don't want to be famous because A, fame is I don't think anything to be bragged about, but B, I don't want to have people, I don't want to be going somewhere and every single time I'm harassed by people, right? Or like, I can't imagine being Justin Bieber where you're just going to get a fucking coffee and there's a camera in your face every time. That sounds like a miserable life for you and your family. I want zero part of that. So for me, I'm not going to make decisions that might lead to that, right? And maybe I won't be as big of a household name as I could be. But again, the sacrifice of that and the money that comes along being a Bieber is I get to live a normal and healthier personal life. And that's important to me. Right? Or as a DJ, you know, like for whatever reason, I don't know what the fuck is going on right now. Like this is like the irony of life, and I feel like it's a fucking you know, it's such the universe works in such weird ways, right? It's the idea of like not forcing shit, right? I don't know what's been happening recently. And this is like very small little things, but I feel the energy coming from it. For whatever reason, as a DJ, I've been getting more attention doing that recently than anything else. And just like a couple social media things, like, but just me like doing music that I want to play has been gaining more, gaining a lot of attention and people hitting me up or whatever, more than some of the other stuff I'm doing, right? And that's all I wanted for the longest time. I wanted to be the big DJ touring the world, producing music and this and that, right? And even like, so we brought my party back, Con Fuego. I've mentioned this before. It's like a global-based party. We play like world music. I get to play a lot of Latin music that I love and like do weird mashups and things like that. Bring all my worlds together and not have to worry about like playing to the crowd and playing what's on the radio basically or on TikTok. And it's just more like soul fulfilling for me. And we were doing that a few years ago, and like it was building up, but the pandemic happened, and now it's like the world is ready for this type of music, and that's what I'm getting like DJ attention from that, right? And I say it's ironic because I've told myself I'm a half retired DJ. I just do it for fun these days. But with that said, hypothetically, if all of a sudden I now am like getting hit up to fucking DJ all over the world, potentially doing 300 dates a year, flown around the world as I had dreamed about, the answer is no. I don't want to live that life anymore. I'm not at that point in my life where I want to be away from home for 300 days a year. I don't want to be flying to a different city every day, right? For me, if I were to get opportunities like that, I would probably say I'm cool to do, 2 to 4 DJ gigs a month that might require travel. Realistically, when I get a family, probably 2 that require travel. I could do maybe 2 flights a month and be away from home for 2 weekends a month, or not even. I would legitimately probably fly back home right away, especially if I had a family. I would just fly to fucking Miami, play a gig, fly right back home. Anyway, my point is, I'd probably be leaving a lot of money on the table, a lot of my potential, what I viewed as greatness or success, like the old version of me, would be like fucking punching a hole in a wall if you heard me say this right now. But for me, that's not worth it, right? I'd rather be making less money, having less notoriety, but spending more time with family and just having a more normal home life. I prioritize that now, right? It's why I live in the suburbs now rather than living outside the city or in the city like I used to. I enjoy having a quieter, normal life around family, and just being able to like chill out and not be amongst the chaos, right? But again, that's like I'm potentially sacrificing, right? Being in those in crowds at all the hot events all the time like I used to be. I'm sacrificing that for a different type of lifestyle. And I think these are the decisions that we have to make and understand. Everything comes with a level of sacrifice, and you have to identify what is most important for you. And actually, pulling it full circle, it's kind of beautiful that granted, Shakira was already a millionaire and an icon prior to getting, this whole thing, but I think it's kind of beautiful that she said, I'm good. I want to live the family life and have, the more stable life, and the hubby can kind of do his thing now. Again, she's in a different boat because she already got to live that life. It wasn't like she sacrificed it all, before her moment happened or whatever. But yeah, I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about anymore. I just went off on a whole tangent, but I think the idea is the quote that I always repeat that you probably want to punch me in the face for hearing so many times at this point. A yes to something is always going to be a no to something else, so you have to choose accordingly. It's everything requires sacrifice, family, relationships, your life, your career. You just have to choose what's important to you and make decisions based upon that. And also, don't guilt yourself, right? Because there's NBA players who maybe didn't achieve Michael Jordan level status, but made a great career for themselves, made a lot of money, had fun. They have a wife and kid. They have a normal life. And again, maybe they're not spoken about in the same breath as Michael Jordan, but they're living a pretty good life by, anybody else's, judgment, basically, right? Anybody else's standards. They're living a great life. So it's like, can you honestly say Michael Jordan's life was worth it? The way he went about things? That's up to you. What do you prioritize at the end of the day? For me, I would have rather been, a Ray Allen, right? Ray Allen has a lot of achievements. He has a ring. But he also has a family life and kids and all those different things. He got to appear in a movie. So, like, he's still successful. Is he Michael Jordan? No. But to me, I think for me personally, for Dramos, that's how I would want to win the game. Being able to have a certain level of success doing what I love, but also being able to have the balance of that family life. And I'm willing to not achieve Michael Jordan level status if it means that I get to have a great personal life when it's all said and done, but also, probably during the end of his playing career, he was a little bit more stable in the family aspect. But again, that's for me. I can't tell you what sacrifice is worth or not worth. That's a personal decision at the end of the day. And I don't even know if we had a constructive, like full circle thought here, but stream of consciousness. That's what we just went through in this segment. So thank y'all for participating. At DJ Dramos on Instagram if you want to be a part of these conversations. Now let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusions Stew.
Time for conclusions stew.
All right, so I ranted, raved, and went way too fucking long on today's show. So I'm just going to quickly summarize all that we've been talking about, because I don't know how, if you're not sick of my voice at this point. I'm sick of hearing myself talk. I don't know. I feel like I'm on drugs. I have no idea what happened. I feel like I've been in the studio for 3 days talking on this microphone. So we're going to just quickly summarize. Isaac Gonzalez talking about the over-sexualized Latina in Hollywood. I think these are just tropes that we slowly have to break away from, recognize our own biases because we all have them, and also recognize like a lot of this is socially constructed because those that were the powers that be sort of handling culture and norms for a while were white people. So I love calling this shit out. I think you have to. I think you have to make people aware of it. Some people are going to, push back on it, say it's not real, but it just is. These are socially constructed, constructs where, again, we bear the burden of representing our entire community essentially every time we do something, right? If she stands up for herself, she's the fiery Latina, right? And it's like, whoa, don't mess with her. This is scary, right? But it's like if Taylor Swift stands up for herself, it's like, let's celebrate her. She's a feminist icon. You see the difference? That's the difference, and that's all just social construct as, you know, what is viewed as acceptable or, you know, weird or out of place or scary. It's just because of what white people have created essentially as the powers that be. And if you're a good white person listening to this, you just be aware of these sort of tropes and things like that. Try not to participate in them or correct them. And any of us as well. We all, again, because of how we were raised, where we were raised, by who we were raised, are going to have certain stereotypes that we've been grown up accustomed to, and we have to be aware of, you know, when they show themselves. Now, the election, when it comes to Latinos, that was a long ass part of the show. I don't know how I summarize that. Basically, Latinas are better than us men in every way possible, and you all continue to showcase that because you also vote more than we do. That needs to change. So that's one thing. I think also the reminder of just how powerful we could be collectively, like the fact that, and obviously this is crazy. It's not a real scenario that could ever happen, but if we all voted for the same candidate, we would be the ones putting them in office, basically. Like, we have that kind of power. So I hear things like that, and I'm like, man, let's collectively come together in various ways around social justice issues, around supporting our creative works, around supporting our brands. If we collectively came together, we would have so much power. This is why we don't have a seat at the table, because we are so divided on so many different things. And when they did those sort of polls on like what's important to people, right? Of course, what was striking to me, they said for most Americans, it's immigration. For Latinos, it's the economy. Yeah, for most Americans, because of the propaganda that's been going on and the you know, hate and the anti-immigrant rhetoric that's been going on and blown out of proportion in media and things like that. Yeah, a lot. Of course, white people are scared to death of what's happening because they're told that every migrant that walks across here is there to kill them and commit a crime. You know, again, goes back to the first thing I was talking about, where we represent the entire community. So a couple of migrants decide to do a crime, and all of a sudden that represents every immigrant in this country. And that's the fucked up nature of being who we are, right? We bear that burden. And then when it comes to the economy, again, if that's your real issue, read about what's going on. I think so many people are, when we see media, when we see the news, you have to understand it's entertainment at the end of the day. They are trying to get ratings. So they are maybe delivering news, but they're doing it in a manner that feeds the agenda of whatever media outlet you're watching or reading, right? Right, left, center. They all have an agenda at the end of the day, good, bad, ugly. And B, they're trying to do it in a way that is entertaining for the specific base that they're speaking to, and that is going to keep that base tuning in. The inmates are running the asylum. So they're not going to bring up all the good that Joe Biden is doing. They're going to find ways to skew the statistics or to do opinion pieces that make it seem like he is the person behind all of your issues, right? Because Fox News, it doesn't do them any help if they actually dig deep into what's going on with price gouging and gas and food and all those things, right? It's better for them to feed their ravenous base the idea that, well, under Biden, gas is this price, food is this price, right? Rather than just saying, well, what's the deeper story here? And that's, I think in general, as human beings, we've failed to take that mode of thinking. When something happens, when we have an opinion, something bad happens, something happens we don't like, we see something that we're just kind of like, oh, that sucks. It's like, what's the deeper story here, right? Like, we see somebody who is an alcoholic and we're like, oh, they have the drinking problem, right? And we judge them. Let's dig deeper though. Why do they have a drinking problem? Or why did they do this negative thing? It doesn't justify their actions, but at least we have a better understanding of it. And when we have a better understanding of it, we can then get to the root of the problem and try and solve the problem. And I think that's what we have to do a better job at, and not just sort of taking the surface level things that are fed to us. And leftover rice apparently can poison you. So cook your rice. You got leftovers. Make sure you get them into the fridge prior to an hour of time passing. All right. I know I never grew up with us doing that. I'm horrendous at that, but it probably explains why I have all these stomach issues that I do. And we hit this segment, this Frida Kahlo documentary on Prime that apparently has been out for almost 3 months. I'm going to check it out this weekend. I love to see important figures from our community and hear their stories. And I think particularly, she's of Mexican descent and she's a strong female character in this world during a time where that wasn't accepted. So I think it's amazing to be able to have an insight, especially if they're using her diaries and her letters, to really have an insight into what made her tick, the decision she made, and what was sort of really going on in her head that was the thing that really drove her art. I think it's just amazing, and it's a blessing to have that kind of insight. And then As A Gringo, talk about the sacrifices made for love. I think the general sort of thing that I took away from that conversation is sacrifice is going to be involved in it, in love, in career, in everything, right? And you just have to choose what you're willing to sacrifice and what is a priority to you. And then you have to find somebody who is willing to play that game along with you, willing to make those same sacrifices, right? I love the example Brenda had given us where her husband for a year was basically like, okay, I'm going to take on the brunt of everything so that you can build your foundation for what you want to do. And that, I think, is a beautiful example of like the give and take. And it's about communicating as well. I don't know the insight completely into their relationship, but I think what I have failed at in the past is communicating maybe what I had told in the segment, where it's like, I'm building this right now with the understanding that I promise it's not going to be this way forever, but I'm building this so that we can have an easier life when we do have a family, when we do have kids and things like that. So let's sacrifice the constant vacations or date nights so we can save money, so I can keep investing and reinvesting. It's something that is going to yield us a life that we've been dreaming about and freedom that is beyond the comprehension of your stupid friend Janice, who is giving you shit that I don't take you on enough vacations. So, but again, you have to have a partner who is on board with that. And these are things you have to discuss beforehand, right? And really get a feel for how that person responds to that and what they're willing to sacrifice or not sacrifice. And I don't think you should ever dumb down your own dream at the end of the day just to be with somebody. That's probably the wrong person. Like, if you have to sacrifice your dream entirely to be with this person, it's probably not the right relationship. Now, again, there's going to be give and take. Maybe you, again, are not going to go Michael Jordan level of psychotic obsession with something, and you have to be okay with not reaching that greatest height. But again, that means you're doing that because you value the other things that you now can do by having a bit more free time, because you're not devoting it to just one thing. You then have more hours in the day to devote it to family life and have that sort of balance. But again, it's to each their own. Success is relative. You choose the type of life you want to live, and then you implement the actions that it takes and bring in the people who fit that sort of puzzle piece of the life you're trying to build. I think that's what it comes down to. I think a lot of people resent their partner because they don't have an honest conversation about it, right? And also don't know where the line is for them. Last thing I'm going to say on this, because I just think it's such an interesting topic. Look at Tom Brady and Giselle, right? So Giselle basically said, yes, I'm going to take a backseat in my career. I'm going to take the brunt of the family life, the kids. I think there's a rumor she might have been, it was infidelity or something, whatever it was. But she definitely, was like, I'm going to take a backseat in my career. You're going to go be Tom Brady, who's going to play football till you're in your 40s, and you're going to sacrifice everything for that. And you're going to win this championship, ride off into the sunset, right? So she supported it. They had a plan in place. They did it, and it worked for that time period. But then Tom Brady valued the game and that identity over the family life, because then he chose to go back and play another year. And that's when his marriage, from the public eye at least, went into shambles. But again, it's because they were misaligned on their goals. And he prioritized his career over family life. And that's maybe something that's never going to change for him completely, right? That's Michael Jordan type shit. But before that, it seemed like it was like a working thing where it was like, okay, if he really could ride off into the sunset, she sacrificed that time period. Now he's going to be the family guy. Maybe she goes back into like creating her businesses and modeling and doing different things like that. Then it would have worked, right? But again, you have to have those honest conversations with your partner and check in with them. And you also have to be honest with yourself about what you want, right? And what's important to you. And yeah, I can do it. I might. Maybe we should get Tom Brady on the show. No, I want to do a conversation about this in a deeper level. I got to find somebody who maybe is like if you have a suggestion, I would love to know who I could talk to. Not like a therapy session. All these interviews have to be therapy sessions for me, but I would love to dive into this a bit deeper. Like, how do we go about designating what's important for us, and then also like healthily delegating that to explaining that to a potential partner, or choosing a partner that we know is gonna be able to work within that balance for us. I'm gonna do some research. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into today's show. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk so much that I now have no voice left. I feel like I've been in the studio for an entire week just speaking. I don't know how long this episode is, but I know it's long. Thank you for making it to the end. I appreciate you. With that said, I will catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, have an amazing weekend. Stay safe, and we will talk soon. Peace.